and a retired parole agent. How you doing today?
Good. How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Doing very well. I love the directness of when you speak. It's just like you're so precise. It's like you want to get the point across with the minimal amount of verbiage.
I'm working on it. That's what I'm trying to do, and I think a lot of that has to do with working in the community for so long. Is that you have when you're a parole agent, you have a caseload of people. I would have hundreds of people that I have to track down every day, and so time is of the essence. And so you're always kind of cutting corners. Same with when I worked in a prison. It's the same thing. You're trying to house guys, hundreds of people. So it's time management pretty much.
Did you find it to be when you actually interacting with them, you didn't want them to keep asking you questions, so you closed up or you wrapped up the whole bow of what you were saying as precise as you could?
Yeah, because you would have, especially in prison, you would have, you walk into a housing unit and you have 200 guys screaming at you because they're just waiting there in cages. And so what I would say to them is, if I didn't, you get to know them. So if I didn't know them, I would say, hey, just write a note for me at the end of the day, put the note on the side of the door, or at the food port, and I'll pick it up, and whatever I can try to do, I'll do. And that was a system that always worked for me. Other people didn't work for them. Other people, other officers would walk up to the door and start screaming at them, or but I just saw that early on was the being kind of patient and not getting angry. I think we were all taught to be angry first. I think
Hmm.
being firm, fair, and consistent always worked better for me.
How did it feel when what was the type of feedback did you really notice from the inmates when you were having that dialogue? Because one of the thing is that they have plenty of time. You don't.
Yeah, I noticed I wasn't getting stabbed, so I was like in the beginning, I'm like, oh, this is working for me because they're not attacking me. Because going into prison, it's everything you've seen. It's all fear because it's everything that you've seen on TV, and prison is a lot of boredom. It's a lot of downtime. It's like 99% boredom with that 1% of exhilaration. Just full on adrenaline fear when you're in the middle of a riot or you're watching somebody get stabbed. Somebody, you do watch. It's prison, so you watch people die. Unfortunately,
Hmm. Yeah, it's. I worked in prison for about 3 months. I told you that. I worked over at Lyman over in Colorado, and I was like, nope, I don't want to be here. I don't know which one's worse, is the inmates or the officers. And I just remembered I was like, oh, I need to get out of here.
it was definitely the officers because the officers were the ones that voluntarily were going there, and that's was my conclusion. Like, I don't know if you saw this, but you would see them fighting after work, or in front of the inmates. They'd be fighting in front of the inmates. And I just always thought, like, we're getting paid to do this. You can always step away from it. The inmates couldn't step away from it. And just as the longer that I did it, I didn't want to do it either. But I was just like, where else am I going to go right now to be able to pretty much afford insurance? But I did. I wanted to quit every day. I just had a goal to try to be a parole agent, and I'd kind of been when I got into it, I had been lied to. I was doing a internship in probation, and probation told me if you want to be a parole agent, you got to go work in a prison, which wasn't true. But I couldn't Google anything at the time, and then I didn't know probation and parole didn't know what they did. Vice versa, the jails and the prisons don't know what they do. So, they told me you have a college degree, you won't even be around the inmates, which wasn't true either. So and then when I got there, I was like, this is really fascinating. So I was just kind of collecting information. I wrote a book about it. Uh, and that's what I looked at. I just looked at it like try to use this to the time that I'm here to my advantage. But it is very depressing. I totally agree with that.
So when you actually became that parole agent, it's how was that? How was it actually that transition? What was some of the things that when you got into that field that like you're like, oh shit, how come we were not actually taking care of this stuff?
Yeah, I think the big thing with so parole and prison don't talk to each other, and you wouldn't know the difference. Like a lot of times, you have parole agents that never worked in a prison, so they don't know what the prison is, and then you have the people in the prison that don't know what parole is. So what they'll do is they'll just they'll release the inmate and say your parole agent's going to take care of everything, which isn't true at all. And I thought that too. And I would always hear that at the prison. Don't worry, the parole agent knows everything. They're going to give you all this money and they're going to give you housing and insurance and they're going to help you get your driver's license. All this stuff that you were like, oh, okay, they're going to take care of me, which isn't true at all. So the transition to the parole agent was great because I got out of the prison for me. And the first probably year, it was great. But then I just was realizing how much politics were at play, and then I was like, oh, this is just as pretty much as worse as the prison. I'm just, at least I'm out of the prison, and you're getting paid more, but and you are helping people, but the resources aren't really there because none of the state has any of the contracts. So if somebody gets out of prison, there's nothing I have to take them to a private institution to get them housed, or sort of I have to take them to if they need like medical attention, I'm taking them outside of parole, and I don't have any control over it. And what they should be doing is there should be a place where there's housing immediately when somebody gets released from prison that's run by parole or run by the Department of Corrections, and that simply just doesn't exist. They say that it does, but it doesn't exist.
So I'm curious about your perspective on this. So when a person gets out of prison or out of jail, how difficult is it for them to be able to find a regular job or a job that they can be able to make a few dollars and do their upkeep being not going back to prison or jail?
I think that it's I think there's a lot of factors to it. I think it is very difficult because you're getting out of prison, you've got to go get a job. The police have taken away your driver's license, any sort of form of identification. So first you've got to go to the DMV and try to get your identification, but you don't have identification to get identification. So that presents problems. And then you've been spending all this time in prison. So you've got to then say, if they run a background check on you, you've got to say, well, I've been in prison, and explain why. So now you've lowered your kind of the chances of what kind of job that you're going to get. And it's probably not going to pay a lot. So you're basically starting all over again. The other side, though, is that what I would see as a parole agent is they just wouldn't show up for job interviews. I would get them a job interview and they wouldn't show up for it. And so a lot of it was the mentality of it. But the other side was, yes, the resources aren't there. There should be, again, because in the prison, there's jobs that they can have. And that should be the same when they're on the outside of, hey, these are considered parole jobs. It's just a transition. But you've really just kind of thrown them out and said, hey, go figure it out yourself. And these are people that they haven't had a good track record of figuring things out for themselves. And I was more than willing to try to help them, but my hands were tied a lot just with basic resources that weren't there. Like, in the beginning, I would buy it with my own money. I would buy a jacket for them or a tent, but then I would realize they would just sell it for drugs. Mm-hmm. And so I'm at a loss and I can't support, a tent's $40, a jacket's $20, whatever. It just built it. I ran out of money way too quickly. And I had to stop doing that.
Do you believe that there could be a program like almost like a 3/4 house or a halfway house that if you're getting people out of prison, but then people that have been successful with actually getting back on their feet or successful-ish, because successful looks very differently to everybody, but having like a mentor or something that is like a low-cost type of job, but actually able to help promote them, the well-being, get back forward.
Yeah, they could easily do that. It was just very sad. I mean, one of the things they don't even have for veterans, they don't even have anything like the prison doesn't track any of the veterans. So when they got out to parole, because I wasn't in the military, so I just thought one day, oh, I'm going to start asking because we have a veterans campus that was close to the parole office. So I started to ask, hey, were you in the military? And sure enough, I had a good 10% that had been in the military, and they had no idea. So I could get them in the car, drive them over to the campus, and then they're set up for housing, everything, because of the fact that they've been in the military. And that was great. But parole parole or the Department of Corrections didn't have that. And that part to me was frustrating because you have a population that they need housing right away. And there should, we had empty offices in our building. You could have housed those guys temporarily. And that was always laughed at. I would bring that up to my supervisors. Hey, there's this whole section of our building that they're empty offices. Why don't we house homeless people there? How dare you bring that up, So I was always shut down for bringing up bright ideas, which is usually the case with law enforcement is you're just ostracized for trying to change things. Nobody really wants to change anything.
Because to be fair, it's like when you have a class of people that have been deprived a long time of their rights, a lot of the individuals that I'm starting to understand about in my social work is that they're products of their environment. They're products of what society has helped them or actually created with their parents. And I'm not giving them an excuse. I'm just saying this is part of the layering system. And if they're in there for like drug crimes or other things, it's about the instant gratification. If they're not having any type of purpose or actually having somebody help them have a leg up and show them anything, they've just been conditioned to be a worse individual. So, how do we expect people that are in those shoes to become part of society again?
Yeah, and what I would see is these are people that they've been lied to their whole lives. So then here comes a guy with a gun and a badge, and they're supposed to now believe what I say. So it took a long. It was all about time. It took a long time for them to even gain trust. And then my problem was I would gain their trust, and then my supervisor would call and threaten them out of the blue for no reason because my supervisor, just he was, thought that it was funny that he could, he had the power to threaten the parolee. So he would call him up and threaten to send him back to prison. Or you would have the police department that would make sweeps. They wouldn't say anything to parole. So you had this great rapport with somebody, and then the police comes and tears up their home. Well, now they don't have any trust in you. They don't believe anything, again, what you say. And so you were always balancing things when it could have been so easy, and it made it so hard. And the bottom line was just they didn't want to pay for it. They, all of these kind of things that are put into place, all this money that's wasted in Los Angeles. We had billions of dollars wasted to house 22 people, and there's thousands of people that are homeless. They're right there in Skid Row. And, you could easily solve it. They don't want to do it on purpose. I mean, they like the fact that you have people that are roaming around that need mental health services, and they do nothing about it.
Because you imagine if we had a society full of mobile, independent people that didn't need a place like Skid Row and everybody had a job. Like, why would we need police officers? Why would we need prisons?
Yeah, and even I just laugh too because you have a police station that's right in Skid Row and they don't even do anything. I mean, they've changed all the laws in Los Angeles and let everybody, nobody's held accountable for anything. And again, that's shocker. That's why crime goes up. But that's by design what the politicians want. The politicians want everybody confused and having to turn to them and hey, if you just vote for me, then this crime will be solved. And here we are, 10 years later since they changed all these laws and nothing's changed. But again, that's why it works. And unfortunately, the people that need the most help that I would see, especially with mental illness, I had a lot of mentally ill people on my case. I had a lot of people with epilepsy who were having seizures, and they were just laughed at. And I would say, hey, this person needs help. And they would say, no, that person's just crazy. And so there was a huge stigma for mental health. And simply they just don't want to do anything to help anybody. And it was frustrating for me because I would have somebody that would 5150 psych hold on somebody, and I would place the person in handcuffs, take them to a psych ward, and they could only be there 3 days, which isn't enough time at all. There were a lot of people that needed to be there long term, and the state just simply didn't want to pay for it.
It's very expensive. I went to an acute psychiatric unit for 7 days over in Colorado. I went to a VA thing, and I found out it's about stabilizing. And a lot of these people, like you're saying, they have all these mental health issues. Quite a bit of it's also food deprived. Some of it is because of substance use that actually decayed the brain. Part of it is some of these people actually became homeless because of an addiction that they created based off of what a doctor gave them, what they got prescribed. And then the doctor said, hey, I can't prescribe you anymore. The person starts fiending, they start going out there and they lose everything else. And a lot of the people, we don't empathize enough and say that a lot of these homeless people, it's not because of choice. It's because of circumstances that they were dealt like a shitty hand or they didn't know how to process it. Maybe might be a sympathizer with them, but my heart goes out to these people.
Oh yeah, mine did all the time. I would have, somebody on my caseload that, my boss would just say, "We'll send him to social services," and I would say he literally can't fill out a social services form. He can't stand in line to fill out a form, to stand in line to go fill out the form for social services to get benefits. So what I would see a lot of times is the people that didn't need benefits were the ones that were getting the benefits, and the ones that really needed the benefits, just their mind could not tell them how to go and process that. And they were all kind of doing the same thing. I mean, they would be naked in a CVS and the police would be called, and the police, a lot of times I kind of always kind of chuckled at this, but it was like the solution for the police would be to shoot the guy. It wouldn't be like, hey, maybe this guy's mentally ill because he's naked in a CVS. But they were kind of always doing the same things because that's how our mind works. But nobody was kind of saying, hey, maybe there's a problem here. We should help these people that are mentally ill, especially when you're going into psychosis, whether it's drugs, and like you were saying, a drug that then causes them to be mentally ill. They're not aware of what they're doing. They're not doing it. They're not doing, those things on purpose. And that's something that I always saw too, was I never felt like they were personally attacking me, but there were other people that felt like it was personal. And I always looked at it like, this is, you've got to really focus one person at a time. And it was that just that one person on your caseload that could take all day long. But the answer that I always get from my supervisor was take her to jail. And that was it. That was the solution for everything.
Like I told you before, my personal interaction where I had that one sergeant that was actually two sergeants, the guy replaced, both humanized my acute psychiatric unit, like my psychosis that I was in. I had a suicide attempt, and they humanized it. They humanized me being a person that was just hurting. And the other guy, the patrol officer, which was taught like, hey, this is what we got to do. We got to go hands on. We have to be more aggressive. We have to shut him down by force. That's what I was feeling from him. That was the energy. And it sucks because what I needed was a human. I needed a person to really care about me. And I saw a video over here actually just south of me in Wyoming. There was a Army veteran. He did multiple tours overseas, and his ex-girlfriend called the cops on him. What happened is that the cops went in there. They had a job to do, and they said, hey, we are going to take you in. And the guy was like, no, I'm not. You're not taking me in. They were not listening to him. And they'll end up actually doing suicide by a cop because the cops had a certain perspective of what they wanted to do. They weren't actually hearing the person. And I believe if we start humanizing each other, even in those acute moments, it's not easy for the police at all. The police are actually giving a really rough deal. But I'm just saying, like, it's humanizing those type of mental health challenges.
Yeah, I mean, even, for me, my daughter has epilepsy, and my boss would taunt me about my daughter's epilepsy. And it was something that really, really hurt me. And he didn't care. He just thought that it was funny, and he was being funny. And he would tell me that I didn't understand humor because I was an old person, even though he was older than me. And that's what I saw all the time, was that we just laughed in Los Angeles, at least. We just laugh off anybody that has any sort of mental illness, anything where they can't, it just reminds me of when I was younger. It's like, oh, you just suck it up. And what I would see with law enforcement and also with military is that, you are in these situations where you're in control of everything and people are depending on you. And then when you're not in those situations, like when I retired, I was just standing in the parking lot, and I'm done with my job after 23 years. And nobody was saying anything, no congratulations or anything like that. And the tables had turned. Well, for the military, you're overseas, and then you come back and nobody is recognizing what you did, or where you were at, or what you were doing, or what you were in control of. And so I see that in combination with law enforcement and military, is that it's just, you're just supposed to understand, and everybody else is, you're just supposed to, again, suck it up and do what you're told. And if you're having a mental health crisis, you're having, I've had good days and I've had bad days. And the police are very aggressive because that's what they're taught. And I never had any training for being a parole agent. It was always about physically restraining people or firearms training. It wasn't, hey, let's sit down and talk to people and find out what's wrong with this person.
So you mentioned suck it up, and then you mentioned suck it up before we got on here. What does suck it up look like when people are in your shoes or in police shoes?
It just means do what I say. I don't want to hear it. That's what it means to me. Or as when I was a kid, it was walk it off. It was like I had a broken leg as a kid, and parents and teachers are just telling you to walk it off. And you're like, no, my leg's broken, and nobody wants to hear it. And I would that would just remind me of law enforcement. Was nobody wanted to hear your problems, and nobody especially wants to hear when you're mentally ill. You know, like right now we have all this fraud going on. Everybody just wants to not talk about it, and you know, that's tax money. And again, I would see that all the time with my job was so much waste, but if you brought it up, people would just tell you to shut up about it. You know, you were just told you're basically just a cog in the system, told what to do.
I guess what I was going to ask is like, why do you think that the law enforcement doesn't actually promote mental health awareness within their own people that are working there to be more mentally and physically sound?
Because we're all mentally ill also. I mean, it reminds me of when they passed a law about spousal abuse, that your gun was going to be taken away if you were arrested. Well, most of those people were law enforcement. So they had to change that law real quick because they had it a felony in California. Then they had to change it to a misdemeanor, and then they had to kind of ignore it because there's a lot of unstable people that are in law enforcement. That's why they get into it. Most people are getting into it because they didn't, you know, you didn't need a degree for it, and kind of they'll pass you right through. I mean, there are a lot of people where it was like, I don't really know if this guy's, you know, got all his chromosomes or not. I don't think this guy should be working in this job, but they hired him. You know, when I went through my psych, the doctor that talked to me said, I don't think you should be working here. You're a little too intelligent. And that always stuck with me because he was kind of saying to me, like, you don't want to be working in a prison. And I was too dumb to realize that. But the bottom line is they're just trying to get people to work those positions, because really in reality, who does want to work in, you know, as I started to work in law enforcement, I was like, who wants to do this job? Because it's a lot. And so I always say, you know, back the blue, but also those guys are kind of crazy. I've never had an interaction with police that was a good one. They've always been horrible to me. And then when you tell people about that story, they always side with the police and say how wonderful the police are. So it's kind of one of those things in life that you really can't say much.
It's like people get conditioned for it. Like, I know when I've seen people that are police officers, they typically, when they're dealing with their struggles, alcohol becomes their best friend. If you mention, hey, what about therapy? They're like, nope, I'm not going to lose my job. I'm not going to lose my badge. I saw a dude that was from Texas. He was a captain out there, and he was like, yeah, people with complex PTSD need to get pulled. And I'm like, what about their job? What about their identity? What about actually helping them out before we actually start pulling them? It's just easy to say, well, this cog is broken. How do we actually refurbish it, or how do we actually fix it, instead of actually just throw it away and not just go towards alcohol or spousal abuse or marital affairs?
Yeah, and that's another, you know, with my job, you could be an alcoholic. That was okay. You couldn't go to therapy because if you go to therapy, they'll take your badge and your gun, and then you lose your job. So that's all that people would see is, well, they told me I could drink. That's okay. And so you would have large amounts of people that were drinking. You'd see people that were drinking on the job because it was acceptable. And so I always kind of looked at it like whatever you were told that was okay and to do, people were going to do it. They weren't going to kind of investigate for themselves. And you get real dumbed down when you're working law enforcement. Nobody's really talking about anything at all. They're just talking about overtime. They're talking about, you know, what vacation they're going to take. Because again, it's a job and it's the office. So people don't really want to bring anything personal into anything. So I look at it like a cult. You become this kind of cult follower. And then there's these little factions where you find people that there's maybe a couple people you can talk to that you think are, you know, you can trust, but most of the people you can't trust at all. So it gets very isolating.
Oh, it sounds like it. And what I would love to see, and I know I don't have any sway in it yet. And the reason I use yet is because macro social work, they try to push certain different policies. I would love to see like mental health being provided for our patrol officers, for the people that are in law enforcement, so that alcohol doesn't become one of the number one crutches. Because to me, when you have that type of abuse, it's a symptom of something else that's below it. And it's easy to just be upset with the department, but how do we actually make it better? So, one, we don't have as many reckless people running around, and two, that we can be able to, when they go back to their families, because I'm curious about this, is when you worked as a parole officer, was it easy to tell your wife about what was happening, what your day to day looked like, or when you worked in a prison?
No, I just and I wouldn't tell her just because I knew what the answer was going to be. Like I would limit what I would say because it's a different world for her that she's in. Like when she relays stories about her office compared to mine, it's night and day. It's completely different. So I would just uh, not bring it up just because there was so much violence in that job. And it was kind of you're dealing with a different subculture of society, dealing with gangs and drugs and prostitution and murders. Uh, that's she's not watching her coworkers beat each other to death. So it was a little different. Um, but that does then draw a line within your marriage when they don't understand. Like for the prison, you got held in the prison. So there were a couple times when I was first married where she didn't understand. Well, I don't understand. Why would they hold you over for 16 hours? One time it was 20 hours. I don't understand why you can't leave. That doesn't make any sense. So it didn't make any sense. Same when you were at, if I was at kind of parties, when you're having kids, you're at these birthday parties. Nobody really wants to hear that you cell extracted somebody or that you took, oh, I got in a fight when I was down at the county jail. Well, why were you down at county jail? Why would you fight somebody? So the other people don't really understand. They don't really want to hear it. They have their own perception. A lot of people just feel sorry for criminals. They're not really feeling sorry for the cops. So you just don't talk about your job. And I think that's true for a lot of people in law enforcement. And I meet a lot of people, when I meet a lot of men that are kind of silent, I can usually tell you're probably in law enforcement, because it's a very distinct, kind of like with criminals. I can see, oh, there's a adult guy in his 40s riding a bike. He's probably a drug dealer because he lost his license. But again, those are probably not things most people should be dealing with. That I got to enter that world and see a side society that I didn't grow up that way. I had no idea that even existed.
How does it feel when you actually meet a person that understands you? Like when you're like, oh, I'm a correctional officer too. Does it ever just like you have that relief, or are you able to ever just have that dark humor fun where you could actually just feel like, oh, I'm not just a crazy guy in the room. I know that's how I felt when I was a Marine.
Yeah, I think that for me it was different. It is nice to meet other law enforcement because then you can say they at least understand the craziness that's going on. But also, there was such a divide within my department of people would take the information and use it against you. So
Hmm.
you were always watching over your shoulder. One of the great things about retirement is I no longer have people follow me around for no reason, because it wasn't just 8 hours of your job. It was 24 hours a day. I mean, they could call you all the time, tell you to come in. You were at the mercy of them. And there would be people, you would say to people, hey, there's somebody following me around from the department. People wouldn't believe you. They just think that you yourself were crazy. And that doesn't happen anymore. Or people telling you what to do all the time. I had dozens of supervisors that would come in to your office all the time to tell you what to do, and you had to do it because they were a supervisor. And I don't have that anymore, and it's great. And not to have that hanging over me is such a great feeling. So now when I meet people that are in law enforcement, it's nice that they understand, but also I'm like, you're a little crazy for not retiring, because now I'm meeting people that are, they're in their 60s and they're still, well, I don't know what to do when I retire because they're in that cult and they don't know how to get out of it. And they are like, well, I'm waiting for the next raise, or I don't want to be at home with my wife, and they can't see out of that what they've created. And I think a lot of people fall into that with their job. Their job becomes their identity, of course.
It does because we spend about 8 hours through a day. Typical person, we're supposed to spend 8 hours of sleeping, and then 8 hours are supposed to be being with your best friend. But however, that doesn't always work out that way. It's more of your job is your family, and you get stuck there for a very long period of time, and that's also a huge part of your identity. Like my brother, he ended up dying right before he turned 50. He was getting ready to retire as a detective. Awesome dude. He had a heart attack. Loved his Coors Lights, and him and I might not have seen eye to eye and everything, but I loved him. And the thing I remember is that it's like you have this dual relationships with your family and then with your coworkers. Like you have this actually not dual relationship. You have these separation of relationships. So when I came back from the Corps, he was like, "Oh, you understand how it feels to be in certain situations." Like I can't talk to his wife was named Sissy. He's like, I can't talk to Sissy about this. I can't talk to other people about this because it doesn't make sense. And I also don't want to impose the fear on them about what we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, like my mom is a my mom is a total, you know, 60s activist. And, you know, I had one time where an inmate had a picture of her because they had like a church function where they had gone in to talk to the inmates or whatever, but my mom had never said anything about it. And my point of view was, hey, stay away from inmates. And her point of view was they need my help, but she wasn't going to talk to me and I wasn't going to talk to her. And that was kind of mind blowing to me. Like, I really felt like she wasn't being very smart about what she was doing. She was putting herself in these situations. Um, you know, she had another time where she's she's holding signs protesting against the military, and I was like, why would you do that? And she doesn't even know why she's doing it, but not saying anything about it. And I just always thought like you should come to me because I know what's going on in a prison. I have a better pulse than other people, and she just wouldn't do it. And she never once. I mean, my family would never bring up that I worked in a prison. Never ask any questions about it. So you're absolutely right. Is I, you know, it was really only when I could talk to other people at my 10% at my office that actually understood me. And you just push your feelings down. My every day was just looking for a new place to eat. I was eating my feelings every single day, and that was my outlet, was finding delicious food.
Well, in America, the caloric intake is something that's huge. And they have this whole thing about food addictions, which people don't realize about how how much it sucks because they're like, oh, you can just quit drinking, you can quit smoking weed or whatever it is, but you just can't quit eating. And when you're looking for desirable food like LA, you guys have great food. Over here in Montana, it's it's okay. And I'm okay with that. It just makes less people want to move here. And but at the same time, it's like to sell somebody, hey, I'm actually having a food addiction because of X, Y, and Z. People laugh at you. They're like, and I'm not laughing at you personally, but I feel like that's what they would do to me. And like, but you know how many people want to actually hear these type of conversations to be like, hey, you know what? I am a little bit off, but that's okay. I can get better. That's what I've been looking for. And trying to talk to a therapist when you don't know how to use the words, it sucks, man.
Oh, I mean, I've been to, you know, my parents dropped me off to go to a therapist, and my dad, my mom, and my sister when I was younger, and they drove off, and I was in the therapist 5 days a week. And I just really realized early on in the fifth grade was this is really a one-way street. He's looking that he's going to help me, but he doesn't really want to help me because my parents are paying him, and he doesn't really want to solve my problems. And then you don't want to tell them too much because then they're going to tell my parents on me, or they're going to tell
Mhm.
somebody else that this kid's having problems. So really, I really realized like, oh, this is kind of just a dance that you're doing. Uh, you know, my parents are feeling good because they sent me to a therapist. The therapist is feeling good. I guess I'm going to try to do better, but nothing's really getting done. Nothing's getting resolved by that. So it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of different avenues um, to get better. And that's the way I
First,
always looked. You know, I always looked at it like my mantra is be good, do good, and that's what I try to do every day. I have lots of faults, but I just try to be a good person and try to look at other sides and how other people do feel, because I do believe, you know, life is a huge struggle for everything, and we kind of see all this. We see everything's kind of cut into pieces on social media, and everything's, you know, so easy for all the people on social media when it really isn't. It's very hard. Everybody's struggling. Everything's expensive. You know, right now going into a restaurant is 4 times more expensive. The service is horrible. The food isn't any good. Everything's changed. Um, and I kind of look at that like, well, that's good because my time when I would go into restaurants, that's where my peaceful time, at least it was cheaper and I could afford it. And now I can't, but I'm retired. So it's okay.
I wanted to bring it back to the dance of, hey, your parents would tell you to do that, like want you to go there, therapist would do something, but personally, when I look at it, I'm like, nobody actually helps us understand what the conversation is supposed to be about, and how vulnerable can I be with a person? How do I actually build up this trust with a person? Like, there is the pathway for boys and for guys. I feel like it's virtually impossible to have that type of dialogue unless somebody's role modeling that things can change and things can heal. And so I wanted to bring back to that because I'm like, when you said that, that shit that hurt, and that didn't hurt me personally, but I can actually just feel the pain of like, hey, I want to get better, but everybody else is feeling good, and all I am is just a marionette to somebody else's play.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it like everything is sales in our society. Everything's kind of bullshit. And you just got to kind of realize, my best advice to everybody is realize that nobody's going to be there to help you. You really have to help yourself. We're kind of sold this lie that there's all these resources and all these people are here to help us and everybody cares. And in reality, people say that they care, but they really don't. I mean, I saw that with when I retired. Nobody cared. I just walked out. Nobody cared that I retired. Nobody's called me ever since. I kind of laugh at it because when I relay that to other people, they don't say like, I understand that's horrible. They make a remark of, well, so what? You're getting a paycheck. And people dismiss your feelings all the time, and so you really do have to I always looked at it like you got to lower your expectations of people and keep lowering them because they're always going to let you down. You kind of got to find your tribe of people. But really for me, I've come to a point where, yes, it's lonely being alone, but it's also like where I'm comfortable. And I do like myself now. I didn't like myself a long time ago, but that was because I was always listening to what other people were telling me. And people still to this day, doing stand-up, after the show, people will come up and say, I didn't like that joke. I don't think that works. Okay, but you're not a stand-up comedian, so I don't have to listen to you. But people are still going to say it, and it still hurts. But you just got to take it day by day, and that's what I do, just to try to get through it. But people will they'll never let you down saying horrible things to you. That's for sure.
Why did you decide to become a stand-up comedian?
Well, I always, I was using humor to deflect, especially with my family. It was like I felt at an early age like this. I'm adopted, and so that played a lot to it also. But I always felt kind of a hole in my heart, and I just realized early on, like, I can use humor to kind of get around situations. So I used humor in prison to get away from horrible situations, and I kind of use that in life also. And in college, I had a guy that was in a band, and he said, "Hey, I want you to open for us." So I opened for his band. It went really well, but then when I did it again, I was bombing. That's kind of I realized like music and prison don't go to, or not music and comedy don't go well together. But it's a great outlet. It's a great therapy. You get up there and you talk about your vulnerabilities, and you talk about these weird stories that you have, and you have a captive audience. They have to listen to you. So it's very hard. You've definitely got to work at it. But it's something that I also looked at as I got older it's my golf. It's something that I can do, and it's something you can get better at, and it really is a sport. And you just got to go up there like boxing. You got to get in the ring and you got to start punching people.
Oh man, that is awesome. The comedians, the one I looked up to a lot was Robin Williams. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. I loved his stand-up more than I even loved his movies, and I thought he was a hell of an actor. That guy could play any role that they gave to him. And then the second one is Jimmy Carr because of how fresh, how quick, and how intellectual. But you can just tell there's so much pain between the words that they're saying because they have had to live that life for so long. And what made them funny was like that pain. At least that's how I look at it. And I think you said Chevy Chase was your guy when you were saying that you role modeled yourself after.
I did. I always loved Chevy Chase. But it's kind of that thing. Whereas I do believe like you probably shouldn't meet your heroes because there's just so many horrible things that he's done to people. And I kind of go through waves of people that I admired, and that changes quite a bit. But it's definitely always been, I've always loved comedy. And it was another thing. I was always afraid to go and do comedy, which is another reason that I do comedy. Just like the prison scared the hell out of me. And I just thought, if the prison scared me, why can't I go do comedy? So it was always something in the back of my mind. So I would do comedy. I would kind of quit. I had to stop for a while because my daughter was very sick. Now that I'm retired, I can do it full time. And it's always learning. I'm always learning something. I'm always going in there going, I want to quit this. I don't want to do it. And then coming out the other side going, oh, I learned from this. And that's kind of all the time when I go up on stage. I learned, and I look at it like I'm always learning something.
That's how I feel about podcasting. When I get a chance to talk to a person like you or anybody else that I interview, I feel like I'm always learning something from them, the different perspectives, like how it is to be a parole officer, to a psychologist, to a person that has been molested as a kid. And it's, you hear this whole spectrum. It's just a humanization of it. And on top of it, I don't say it's scary anymore doing this, but if anything, it's just been so relieving. Like you're just following a passion. You kind of feel like your cup is getting full when you do your not pot when you do your comedy. Is there any way people can actually see your comedy?
Yeah, I've got it on all my social is Mike Knox Comedy at Mike Knox Comedy. I'm at Flappers Comedy Club tonight at 7:30. So I'm always posting. I'm in Los Angeles, so I'm always local in Los Angeles doing comedy.
So you also are a writer. What did you write about?
I've got a book about prison called Straight Fish. I got a book about my daughter's epilepsy, which is called Vivian's Rain. My daughter actually has a medical device, like a pacemaker for your brain, that's absolutely saved her life. So I'm a epilepsy advocate. My third book is about pretty much like drugs in prison, or not prison, drugs in college. My time when I lived in Santa Barbara. And I have a fourth book that's coming out this month, which is letters that I wrote to Consumer Affairs. There's no really kind of such thing as Consumer Affairs, but I used to write a lot of letters and I'd get free stuff. And with the internet, nobody even answers your emails anymore. So it was all the letters that I collected over the years where I got free stuff. One of the things that I got was I wrote a nice letter to airline, sent me a free airline ticket, a peanut $100 certificate for drinks on the. I mean, it wouldn't happen now. Nobody cares anymore.
Well, you just cut out quite a bit. Is there any way you could just repeat that last two sentences?
Sure. I was just saying the United Airlines sent me airline tickets because I just wrote a letter to them. And I write letters emails all the time to companies, and they don't even reply anymore. You get AI. You're not even talking to a real person anymore.
So I had the same type of situation. So I was about to switch my insurance from USAA to Geico, and they told me, "Oh, your rates are higher. Rates are higher because of X, Y, and Z." And I'm like, "I have a damn near perfect credit score. So why is that an issue?" "Oh, I don't have a car loan anymore because I paid it off. I used it 2 years ago, but I paid it off." And I'm like, "Everything you're trying to penalize me for doesn't make sense. Can I talk to somebody?" "Oh no, you could talk to an AI person or AI thing." And I'm like, "Nope, you're not getting my business. Have a good day."
Yeah, I had the same thing. I have Geico, and I've never had an accident, and they raised my rate. And I said, "Why would you raise my rate? I've never even have an accident." They gave me a bunch of nonsense, and that's how they all are. No, they raised all the rates for everybody, and they just give you one big lie after the next, and they know that you're not going to do it. There's nothing you can do because they have you can go find somebody else, but it's a pain in the ass to go do that.
It is a pain in the ass for sure. So you mentioned your daughter's epilepsy. How is it to be a father and the protector of your daughter? And how old is your daughter?
She's 19 now. She started to have seizures at the age of 2. So from 2 to 8, it was just trying to figure out, what was wrong with her and how can there's no cure for epilepsy, but how can we minimize her seizures? She ultimately got a vagus nerve stimulator, which she's been 9 years seizure free now. But my life from age 2 to 8 with my wife and I were just watching. She was having nocturnal seizures. So it was just watching her all night long, then having to go to take her to school or go to work. So it was disrupting our sleep and everything. We really just focused on her for a good 6 to 8 years. I still have, PTSD from it. But she's got into college. She's getting ready to live on her own and be independent. And that's all that I ever wanted for her.
How were you and your wife able to navigate that? Because I would think it's a lot of stress in that relationship. And the reason I'm asking is because I'm curious about for other people that are married that have a kid with special needs, then how were they able to navigate that situation?
For us, it was just fear. It was, you didn't have any time to reflect. You really didn't have time to go, oh, this is what I'd like to change, or this is wrong. It was, hey, is she going to live through the night? So it was a lot of, for me, it was just a lot of praying, and please, 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 somebody help me. And finding doctors that were horrible and finding doctors that were good, just trying to find a hospital and somebody that would see your side to things. I mean, there was a lot of waiting. We'd wait 5 hours at UCLA to see a doctor for 10 minutes that would say, I don't know what to tell you. There's nothing you can do about it. There was a world-renowned doctor that said, your daughter's not going to live past second grade. She's not going to mentally be able to complete second grade. She's, there's no hope for her. There was a lot of hopelessness. But I could at least depend on my wife. And I think we're a good team. And that was my only goal, was to save my child's life.
So you're kind of grieving two identities too, with leaving the parole, then also with your daughter being out on her own. How is that like? Have you started to take that in of like how you're going to handle that? This,
Yeah, and again, there's nothing. I just look at it like she's 19 now. Yes, she just needs some help, but she, in the eyes of society, is an adult. It's I kind of laugh because I took her to. She's getting her license. She's getting her driver's license. So I took her to the DMV, and the DMV people are like, "Sir, she's an adult. You're not allowed to intervene. Let her speak." And it's like funny because the transition for our society is once you're 18, you're supposed to know everything. And even though she's considered an adult, she doesn't. How would she know anything about the DMV? She's never been to the DMV. She doesn't. She doesn't know what a absolute dumpster fire it is. Or same with the bank. She doesn't know how to get a bank account. Shouldn't we be able to help them, or at least note, hey, these are still kids. She's still in high school. So I just use kind of humor and laugh. And I know that whatever we're kind of approaching, there's going to be problems. Like I'm trying to get scholarships for her because of her epilepsy. So I need a doctor's note. But I can't get a hold of the doctor that she's had for the last 15 years because they have an AI support system. So I can't email them or call. So I've got to physically now go down to the hospital to get them to sign the form physically. They can't email it to me because I can't get a hold of anybody. So again, I've just known that they're always going to let me down, and just to keep pushing forward. And I do believe there's always a third option. Things are always going to work out. They're just not going to kind of work out the way you thought they were going to work out. But it's not been great, but it has always worked out.
hmm. And my friend Chelsea, she said her aunt had seizures for 55 years, and she wasn't supposed to live past 13. Unlike I, I never had kids, and what I can actually hear in your voice, because your voice actually changed a different inflection when you start talking about your daughter. Like it was about the ignorance of the system, the one size fits all. Like this is where they start looking at it as colorblind racism or colorblind discrimination, where they say, hey, you're just because this is supposed to work for people, you're not including everybody else at how this is going to impact. And like this is a huge issue why they've been trying to push like equity instead of just equality of saying, hey, your daughter's 19 years old. She should be able to do this and navigate this on her own. Mike, I understand you being a father, get the hell out of the way. But not understanding the other conditions of what you need to do to be able to provide the services for your daughter.
Yeah, and those are things, like her school refused to keep her medication, her life saving medication on campus, but they would keep the medication of kids who had peanut allergies. So it was always a struggle. I would walk her to class. The school didn't like me being on campus. They didn't like the parents walking their kids to campus. I just ignored them. They didn't like us being late. They would always, huge battles. Had to contact lawyers quite a few times because the schools wouldn't do anything. Had to contact lawyer a few times because the epilepsy foundations wouldn't do anything. The epilepsy foundations do absolutely nothing. You would think that they're there to help you, but all they do, they're there for fundraising. So everybody was consistent in letting me down, but I was never going to let my child down. And so, yeah, it pained me a lot. It pained me, especially at work, when my boss would make fun of my daughter. And there's really not much I can do because the business is protecting him, and he's a horrible person. And I just have to, there's a reason this is happening. I have to look past this. I have to focus on my daughter's health. And that has been a blessing, is focusing on my daughter's health is, kept me, I don't focus on all this other nonsense that goes on in the world. I just focus on my family. And I think that that's the key to life, when you're focusing on the things that are in front of you that you have control over. I don't have control over so much stuff that's thrown in front of our faces. And I do feel very bad for kids now. My daughter brought up to me, my phone brings me all of this violence every day, and I don't even have time to talk. I don't even have time to talk to you about it. I'm at school and I see that somebody got assassinated, or I see that there's a war going on, and I wasn't even prepared for that. And I don't think that's fair. And I think that that's a fair assumption from her. All these kids are getting all this information that I certainly never got. It's too much information.
Like, I went to a cup of coffee with my buddy yesterday, and he's a guy that I really confide in certain stuff. And the reason I'm actually bringing this up to this is, like, he's like, "Well, how you doing with today's political climate?" I said, "Honestly, Rod, I don't have fucking time for this." Like, I'm like, nope, I don't have time to look at all this crap. This is just nonsense to me. I am just too busy with life right now, where if I was to get absorbed into an area that I have no control over, I would lose my mind.
Yeah, and I think that that's the design. I can tell you, I do not care, but I do care that all of our tax dollars are being spent in places that shouldn't be spent. But there's nothing I can do about it. I just paid my property taxes of $9,500. $2,500 of that has nothing to do with my property. So those are the things that I've got to do as a homeowner. But I don't have to, I can't stop them from where they spend my money. So I just, again, focus on what's in front of me and what my tasks that I got to do. And again, I do every single day. I'm like, all I can do is kind of the AA mantra of all I can do is today, the 24 hours that I have to get this day. And I'm just thankful. I'm thankful that my daughter's health, number one. And I'm just thankful, that I'm still here after all this time.
It sounds like you're an amazing father. You could just tell how much you care about your daughter and you care about your wife. It's great to hear that even with the society and the climate that you were in didn't jade you too much, and you're still an advocate for people that don't have the voices.
Yeah, yes, I am. And I do try to, a lot of the comedians are young. And a lot of them have, what I didn't realize before, everybody's moving to Los Angeles. So kind of when they look at you, that I grew up in Los Angeles, and they kind of are like, well, why aren't you famous by now? Because it's a work, it's a job, it's work. And people are moving here because they want to become famous. And I think if you just look at it like a job, like in life is a job. Whether you don't have to do anything, you just got to exist. But don't be mean to other people. Things are going to be okay. If you're nice to people, they're going to be nice back to you. And I do think at the core, everybody, they are good. And I think good always beats evil.
Well, I hope so. I do. So, Mike, what would be a message that you want people to know about you? And then also, what is a message that you want to be able to give to people that are listening to this?
I don't have a message to anybody. But I do want people to have a good life. I think life is in the aspect of mental health. Everybody's going through a struggle every single day, and to pause and to appreciate what it is that we do have. because I do think life is a gift. It's just hard to kind of see through all of the nonsense of it to see what it's about. But for anybody, it's find something that you love to do, and do your best to have fun doing it.
Mike, I'm going to ask you again. Can you please tell us how you were able to find your books and also some of the recordings of your stand-up?
Sure. You can go to mikeknox.com or at Mike Knox Comedy on YouTube. I'm always on Instagram and TikTok. Any social media, that's where you can find my books. You can email me. I'll send you my book.
Do you like when reads? I agree and I'll disagree at the same time. I know I've been learning to read a lot, and I've been trying to buy everybody's book that I interview, because it just, to me, it's like, you spent the time, give me your time. And I value everybody's relationship that I have the pleasure of talking to and interacting with. It's just been absolutely a delight.
And I do too. That's why I always love doing anybody's podcast and talking about my story. I do think everybody does love prison, especially that. But I love talking about, there's 60 million people with epilepsy. There's no cure for epilepsy. It's been around thousands of years. So for me to be able to talk about it, it really opens up that door to people then going, oh yeah, my relative has epilepsy. And it really is that one-on-one conversation to then educate people about epilepsy. So I do enjoy doing that.
So you actually said vagus nerve stimulator.
Vagus nerve stimulator.
So if I remember correctly, it's the rest and digest area, the component. Like why does it actually help with the epilepsy?
So you have a vagus nerve that goes to your brain, and then there's one that goes to your stomach. And so they have a little generator, and it's sending electronic impulses to your vagus nerve. So it's actually interrupting the seizures. So for my daughter, who's having them all the time, it's just interrupting them, so she's not having them. And beyond that, it was also, the first time that I really realized that it was working was my daughter woke my wife and I up. She had gotten dressed. She'd made lunch, made breakfast. She put a Lego set together. She said, I want to go to school. So this is a little girl that was heavily medicated, that could barely communicate, really. When I look back at videos, it's very sad. I would always have to wake her up. I would have to dress her. I would have to, physically take her to places. And here's somebody that it was like, oh, she's got her independence. It's like a light bulb switched on. And we're driving to school. And prior to that, she was always very silent. And coming from comedy background, it was very sad for me that I couldn't joke around with her. And that particular day, she told me a joke, it's a silly dad joke. And I was like, oh, this thing's working. So even beyond stopping her seizures, it's allowed her to, now her mind's working again. She's allowed to, this is a kid that went from never thinking she was going to be able to read to her grade point average of 3.9. So that's 3 times higher than my grade point average. I got into college. I never got into any college. And so that device was something that, this is helping her learn. She's actually learning now, which everything was stunted because of her seizures. It was basically taking away her entire life. So it's been such a great medical device. But again, it's the pharmaceutical companies that run everything. So there's kind of that battle going on. And she is 9 years seizure free and just a happy teenager.
I want to say that one of the people listening, she's a mom of special needs, and she said your message really spoke to her, and the lack of support is extremely frustrating.
It is, and my heart goes out to everybody that is dealing with anything. I really see that, every year I go to Disneyland Expo for epilepsy, and everybody is so fractured because everybody is, when they're dealing with, speak to so many different parents, and it's just so heartbreaking when it's it's your child, and you're trying to get other people to hear your story, and people don't want to hear it. And that, unfortunately, is what I see a lot also.
Yeah. And I believe these are why these conversations are important to have. It's like,
very important.
to me, like mental health is not just a person with a diagnosis of major depressive disorder, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia. The physical situation creates a hardship. I have had the pleasure of working at the VA for 3 years before I started going to my grad program. And people that were not able to communicate by talking or by hearing, they started to become more depressed because they started pulling themselves away because they didn't want to agitate people. And then watching how their spouses or watching their spouse, the person that's eroding, not being able to communicate, and how much it hurt them, and watching how it was just like this cesspool pulling people away. And if you have a child that actually you genuinely love and you're genuinely advocating for, and everybody's just pretty much saying, our system is just to collect money, it's not for you. It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I have found one or two organizations that are okay, but the majority of them are absolutely, they get money from the state or the feds or donations, and they'll do like a walk, um, and you kind of find out where the money is going. It's going right back to them. It's not going to the research, which it should be going to. And unfortunately, with epilepsy, because there's no cure for it, they don't even want to consider trying to find, pouring money into it. And it really, I mean, epilepsy kills more than I don't want to make a comparison, but it's more people dying from seizures than breast cancer. So the numbers are all there. The people are, especially with sudden unexplained epilepsy in children. It's just devastating for so many people and so many families that are losing their loved ones, and kind of nothing. It's not really something that's people want to talk about. And I think because it's your brain and it's hard for people to communicate what they're going through with mental illness or with epilepsy, special needs.
Well, I appreciate that insight. I really do, Mike. And I appreciate you making the time to come on here and talk with me.
Well, I appreciate you. I mean, there's so many people that I reach out to and they hear epilepsy. They don't want to discuss it because it's not, glittery, I guess. So I do thank you very much for letting me talk about it.
Yeah, anytime. And I'm honestly, you could just tell or at least I can tell about how passionate you are about it. And it's like how much it's really hurts. And I believe giving a voice to other people and you actually giving the voice, like I said, my friend, she has a special needs child, and it creates all these barriers in other people's lives that where people are not able to talk or they're able to communicate because people just shut them down, or they don't have the same type of empathy to be able to say, wow, like, can you stop talking about your kids so we can actually talk about something else? And they don't realize that what's happening with your child is very consuming because it is your whole life. And I believe that it's extremely valuable to have that conversation instead of just saying, baby, go sit in the corner.
Yeah, that was something that you brought up empathy, and that's what all I ever wanted from the doctor's offices was just some sort of empathy of what my wife and I were my daughter, of course, was going through. And I think that that's what we lack a lot of times because when we're going through all these going through, I went through a time where it was like, I want to get to a point where I don't have to go to the doctor and listen to these professionals tell me what's wrong with my child. I just wanted empathy from people. And I never really got that, and that always bothered me.
Well, hopefully I was able to give you a little bit on this episode, and I want to say thank you so much for your time, Mike.
Thank you. I appreciate it.